everyone, in this video we are going to discuss the questions that were asked from process of communication in NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 March cycles. So before moving into the question, we'll be first looking at this particular topic, that is process of communication. So we have already done a video on this particular topic a couple of months or a year back, I guess. So the video or the link of that particular video is given in the description box. So if you need further explanations on this particular topic, you can just check out that particular video. So if you consider the diagram that is given here, this actually explains the process of communication. So basically we have several elements or different elements that are a part of this particular process. So we have a center, then we have the process of encoding, message, channel, decoding, receiver, and then we have feedback, and also here you have a concept that is noise. So what happens in a communication, or when you are in a conversation, or when you are engaged in a communication, what is the process that happens behind it? So basically we are having a center for any communication. There is a person or there is an event that actually initiate the conversation. Let's consider an example like this. If you are talking with your friend, the person who initiates or the person who starts that particular conversation can be called as the sender. So the message first flows from the sender to the receiver, right? So the person who initiates the conversation or the source from which the message actually comes or the flow of message starts can be called as the sender. So after sender, we have a process named here that is encoding. So what do you mean by encoding? So sender can be called as the encoder of the message. So what do you mean by that? So if you consider a conversation, basically we can say that when we are in a communication or in a conversation, we are actually exchanging ideas or we are actually exchanging thoughts. So these thoughts are basically in our mind, and we can or we should have to convert these thoughts or ideas in a very understandable way so that the receiver can understand what we are saying to them, right? So we are having different ideas in our minds, or we are having different thoughts in our minds. So when we are engaged in a conversation or when we are indulged in a communication, we are actually trying to transmit or we are actually trying to convey a message or an idea or a thought to that particular person who is listening to us. So we have to convert those ideas that are in our mind to a form that the receiver could understand, right? So we'll be using words for that. Sometimes we'll be using non-verbal forms, like we'll be using body language, or we can use our facial expressions. All these things can actually carry out a message to the person who is listening. So this part of the communication, or this part of the process of communication, that is converting an idea or converting a thought to a form, it can be verbal or non-verbal, that the receiver can understand, can be called as, or that process of converting the idea to a message can be called as encoding. So after this process of encoding, what comes? Message. So encoding results in the formation of message. The center will be encoding a message, and the sender will be sending that message through a channel. So channel is basically the means or the medium through which we are actually transmitting or we are conveying that particular message to the receiver. So it can be of any sort. You can choose the perfect channel or the most appropriate channel considering the context of your communication. Let's say you can use your mobile phone as a channel in which you are having different apps, or even you can use email, and all these things can be considered, or you can choose which is the right channel according to the purpose of your communication and also the context of your communication. So the sender will be encoding the message and sending that message through a channel which is actually received and decoded by the receiver. So what do you mean by this decoding? So as I have already mentioned, sender can be called as encoder, and likewise the receiver can be called as the decoder. So what is decoding in that sense? So basically when we are receiving a message from a person, we are actually receiving it in the form of some words, or it's a message that we are receiving, and as a receiver we need to interpret. We have to understand that message. So basically when we consider encoding, this is actually making, or it is actually converting the ideas and thoughts in our minds to a particular form that the receiver could understand. That is what this process of encoding is all about. So this particular thing is what we are getting. This message is what we are getting. So it comprises of various verbal and non-verbal cues, and we need to interpret that message. We need to read. Let's say if you are getting a message, let's say a WhatsApp message from your friend. So when you're opening that WhatsApp message, you'll be seeing some words there. You'll read that, you'll understand that, then you are getting the message what the sender is actually trying to convey to you, right? So that process of interpreting or understanding that particular message that you have got can be called as decoding. So what is the process in which the receiver is involved in the process of communication? The receiver is the person who is receiving the message, and also in order to understand it, the receiver has to decode it. So this interpretation and understanding can be called as decoding. So likewise, we have a sender. The sender is encoding the message, and that message is traveled or it is conveyed through a channel which is received by a receiver who is decoding and understanding the message. And after that, what happens? We have another term mentioned here, that is feedback. Until this process, that is the process until which the receiver is getting or receiving the message, it's just a one-way communication. So when this particular this particular term, feedback, that comes into a conversation or a communication, that particular communication becomes two-way in nature. So what do you mean by feedback? It is actually a reply. Okay, so the sender is actually sending a message to the receiver got the message, and the receiver reading it, and the receiver is trying to interpret and understand that message, and after that the receiver will be giving a reply to the sender. So that reply can be called as feedback. So feedback is actually something that makes the process of communication more effective. Why is it so? Because when the receiver is giving a reply or a feedback to the sender can understand, okay, the receiver is getting the idea, or the receiver already understood what I already conveyed to him or her. And if there is anything, any mismatching in what the sender has sent and the thing the receiver has got, or the idea the receiver has got, the sender can understand it through the feedback itself. So the sender can again convey the message in a much more clearer manner. In that way, the feedback makes a communication two-way in nature, and also it makes the communication more effective. So feedback is just, you can consider it as a reply from the receiver to the sender. Alright, so another concept that you can see in this diagram is about the noise. So noise is a technical term that can be defined, or that can be associated with the various distractions or disturbances that can actually come in between this communication. So it is actually a flow of message, or if you consider the process of communication, we can say that the message is flowing from the sender to the receiver, right? So in any of these stages, there are certain chances of certain disturbances can actually distract this entire process of communication. Those kinds of disturbances or distractions that can actually affect this process of communication can be called as noise. And this noise can be of various types. That we have semantic noise, for example. So semantic is a term that is associated with language. So if there is any kind of if we have any kind of distractions that are associated with language, like the sender is sending a message in a particular language and the receiver is not that well versed in that language, and the receiver is not getting what the sender is actually trying to convey, that is actually a kind of disturbance or a distraction or a barrier. We can call it as a barrier as such. So that can actually affect the effectiveness of a communication. So that kinds of distractions, of disturbances can be called as noise, and semantic noise is such a disturbance, and we can consider it as a type of noise as well. We have physical noise as well, we have psychological noise as well, and there are various types of noise or various types of barriers that can actually affect the entire process of communication. So this is an idea, an overall idea about the various elements that are involved in the process of communication, and also we tried to understand the entire process as such. So as I have already mentioned, if you want to know more about this, you can just use the link that is given in the description box, and you can see or you can watch that particular video and know more about each and every element that is mentioned here. So now we are moving to the questions that were asked from this particular area in NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles. And here you have the first question. This is a match the following question. So this type of question can be expected in your next exam as well. So this match the following question is one type of question that could be or that can be asked from this process of communication. So in list 1 we have the various elements of communication, and in list 2 we have the character feature. Okay, so consider the list 1 elements of communication. We have source, then we have receiver, then we have message and channel. So now you know all these terms very well. You know how these different elements are associated with the process of communication as well. And list 2 we have means used to convey the messages, set of verbal and non-verbal clues from source, a person who interprets the message, a person or an event which provides a verbal or non-verbal clues. Coming to list 1, just consider option A. Source. So what do you mean by source? If you consider list 2, which is the most appropriate option that you can associate with option A in list 1, that is source, that is obviously option 4, right? A person or an event which provides verbal or non-verbal clues, right? So source is a person, or you can call it as the center as well. So source or the center is a person or an event which actually provides verbal or non-verbal clues, or that is a person or event which actually initiates the entire process of communication. In that respect, we can say that A can be associated with option 4. Moving to the next option, that is option B, receiver. So what is or which can be the right option that you can associate with receiver? Obviously option 3, a person who interprets the message. We already said that receiver is the person who decodes the message, or he can be called or she can be called as the decoder. So what is the process of decoding is all about? It is actually interpretation, or it is actually the receiver is trying to interpret and understand the message. That is what this decoding is all about. So in that respect, we can say that receiver is the person who interprets the message. So B can be associated with option 3. So what do you mean by message then? So what is message in a communication? So message is basically the set of verbal and non-verbal clues from a source. So message is from the source, and it is a set of verbal and non-verbal clues. The sender is actually converting the ideas and the thoughts that are in the sender's mind to different verbal and non-verbal clues, and that consists of the message which is received by a receiver, and it flows through a channel as well. In that respect, option C, message, can be associated with option 2, that is set of verbal and non-verbal clues from source. Moving to the final option in elements of communication, that is option D, channel. Channel can be called as the means, or it is the channel or the medium through which this communication or this message flows from the sender to the receiver. In that respect, we can say that means used to convey the message. So channel is basically the means through which the sender is actually conveying the message to the receiver. Okay, so in that respect, we can say that option A can be associated with 4, B is 3, then C is 2, and D is 1. So A4, B3, C2, D1 is option D. So the right answer for this question is obviously option D. the next question. Here you have a statement question. We have to identify whether these statements are true or false. Statement 1 says, communication is the process of transmitting a message from a source to an audience via a channel. So we have already discussed about this entire process of communication, and we said that communication is basically a flow of message, or it is actually the process through which we are transmitting message from a source or a sender to a receiver, or you can call it as the audience as well, and this transmission happens through a channel. So that is what the statement 1 says here as well, right? Communication is the process of transmitting a message from a source to an audience via a channel. In that respect, we can say that statement 1 is true. Moving to statement 2, it says to establish commonness between the source and the audience is effective for success of communication. So it says that if there is a commonness among the source or the sender and the audience, that will make the process of communication more effective. So that is again a true statement. Why is it so? So if you consider a group of people, or if you consider a sender and a receiver who is in this communication process, or who is involved in a conversation, if they are having a commonness among them, let's say if we are having a conversation with a person who is having a similar taste like us, or we are having a topic that is of interest of both the source and the audience, then this communication will be really effective. Another example, if we are having a conversation with a person who is having the same language as yours, so that will make the communication more effective. So you both have the same language, so that will make the communication more effective. And if you are two people and you are having the same interest, and you are having same interest in talking about certain topics, so then that will make the entire process of communication more interesting, involving, and also effective. In that respect, it can be said that statement 2 is again true. To establish commonness between the source and the audience is effective for success of communication. So if you can establish commonness between the source and the receiver, then the communication process will be really effective. In that sense, we can say that both statement 1 and statement 2 are true. So the right answer for this question is obviously option A. Moving to the next question. In describing elements of communication, a person or an event which provides verbal or non-verbal cues to which someone can respond is known as, and we have the options: message, source, channel, and communication context. So what is the question here? We have to identify the term that can be suited for the person or an event which can actually provide, or the person or event which actually initiate the conversation. That is the meaning here. So the person or an event which provides verbal or non-verbal cues to which someone can respond. So the person who is initiating, or the event which initiates the process of communication to which the receiver can actually respond to. So what is that term that you can give to the person or an event which provides verbal or non-verbal cues, or the person or the event that initiates the conversation? Obviously, that is option B, source. Right. So the right answer for this question is option B. Coming to the next question, we have given the various barriers in communication in list 1, and we have the description in list 2. So this is a match the following question. And in list 1, we have channel noise, semantic noise, psychological noise, and entropy. So in list 2, we have the description like state of disorder, difference in perception, language disorder, interference with the medium. So in that case, what do you mean by this noise? We have already said this is the interferences, or it can be called as the disturbances, or the various distractions that can actually affect in the process of communication. In that way, if you consider option A, channel noise can be associated with which description in list 2? Obviously, that is option 4, right? Interference with the medium. So channel is basically the medium through which we are transmitting the message. So if there is any kind of interferences with the medium, that can actually result in a barrier, or it can actually result in a noise, and that can be called as the channel noise. In that respect, channel noise can be associated with option 4, that is interference with the medium. Moving to the next option, that is option B, semantic noise. So we have already mentioned this as an example when we have discussed about the concept of noise, and semantic is obviously a term that is associated with language. So if there is any kind of language disorders that could actually affect the conversation or the communication, that can be called as semantic disorder. In that respect, we can say that semantic noise can be associated with option 3, that is language disorder. Okay. Moving to the next option, that is psychological noise. So, if you consider the options here, which can be the right option that you could associate with option C, that is option 2, difference in perception. So, that is basically if you are having different perceptions or you are having different attitudes to a conversation, it can all contribute to the psychological noise. So, that is again a kind of barrier to effective communication. So, psychological noise can be associated with difference in perception. If two people are involved in a conversation and these two people are having different perceptions about a same thing, then that communication couldn't be effective, right? So, psychological noise can be associated with option 2, that is difference in perception, and entropy is a term that is associated with communication that can be called as the state of disorder in a communication. Please do remember this term and also the explanation or the description here. Several times we have got this particular term in the exams, and you can find it in mass following questions like this. So, please do remember that entropy is a term that can be defined as the state of disorder in a communication. So, in that respect, again coming to the various options, A can be associated with option 4, right? So, A is for interference with the medium can be called as channel noise. Then we have option B, semantic noise can be associated with option 3, that is language disorder. Option C, psychological noise can be associated with option 2, that is difference in perception. Entropy can be associated with state of disorder. In that sense, A4, B3, C2, D1 is option B. So, the right answer for this question is obviously option B. Moving to the next question. In a classroom, transforming verbal and non-verbal signs back into messages is known as, and we have the options feedback, encoding, decoding, and reverse communication. So, what is the question here? What is a term that you can associate with the transforming of verbal and non-verbal signs back into message? So, this is what you have to concentrate here. The point that is mentioned in this question here is, if you consider, anyway, the process can be either decoding or encoding, that is for sure. So, transforming message, or if you are transforming the idea or the message that is in your mind to verbal and non-verbal signs, that can be called as encoding. You have a message or you have an idea in your mind and you are converting that particular idea into verbal or non-verbal clues that can be, or signs that can be called as encoding. And when you are a receiver and when you are receiving a message, when you are receiving a particular message that is full of this verbal and non-verbal signs, you have to convert that into a meaningful message. You have to interpret and analyze, and you have to understand that message that is right there in that particular conversation. So, that can be called as decoding. So, that is what it is mentioned in this question as well. Transforming verbal and non-verbal signs back into message. So, that can be called as decoding, back into message. So, if it was like transforming the ideas or transforming the message that is in your mind into verbal and non-verbal signs, that will be encoding. But here it says transforming verbal and non-verbal signs back into message. So, that is obviously option C, decoding. Alright, so in this video we have discussed about the various questions that were asked from process of communication in NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles. This is a very easy topic from the module communication, but still this is a very important topic as well. So, please do understand the various elements that are associated with communication and also try to make a proper idea about the entire process of communication as such. So, this kind of a very systematic approach to NET is very important when you are preparing for this kind of a very competitive national level exam. So, if you need any kind of help, you can just contact us. We are having offline and online classes available here. So, if you'd like to know more about our courses, you can just contact the number that is given in the description box. So, thanks for watching and happy learning.